Hurt people hurt people. That's what it comes down to. That is exactly what you're experiencing when being bullied. I'll say it again. Hurt people hurt people. The first time I can remember being bullied was when I was very young and taking the school bus to get to elementary school. It was also the first time I had ever heard such a foul mouth on such a little kid. All these years later, I still remember his name and even what he looked like. He would get on the bus, and first thing out of his mouth was a long string of curse words aimed at, well, like, nobody, or everybody. I guess at whoever was caught in his terrible aura of anger and misplaced rage. He was oozing so much negative energy it was almost fantastical, like witnessing a creature from a movie go around and bite people's heads off. Most of the time it was making fun of other kids with words, and if he felt like it, some physical shoving or pushing. I don't think he ever hit anyone, at least not me. His main tactic would be to tell someone to move out of their seat by slinging and spewing terrible curse words at them, and then if they didn't move, he would just sit down, get in their face, and berate them until they did move. I don't remember anyone standing up to him. It was routine. If he got on the bus that day, all of us other kids knew he was trouble and would just collectively sigh and wait for the storm to pass, or be the victim of his whirlwind of words and sometimes physical attack. I don't know how or if kids on the bus today are monitored or have any chaperones or what, but back then there were no cameras or cell phones, so witnesses to bullying were just experiencing it firsthand, and if no one else saw anything, it was their word versus the bully. I know bullying still happens with or without witnesses, and it saddens me, of course, to think that there's so much pain in the world. You're just a kid trying to make sense of things that are shaking up and changing your world all the time. You're trying to figure out where and how you fit in, and now there's this problem of having to face these poor broken souls acting out their aggression on unwitting and innocent victims. I actually had a relatively good experience with elementary school, despite the normal mix of bullying and bullies. Admittedly, there were a few bad apples which definitely stressed me out at the time, but overall it just seemed like part of the routine of going to school. It was in middle school when things really heated up. Well, naturally, right? Puberty hits, and now you've got what would have been a whirlwind of a bully in the younger years, who's now grown into a Category 5 hurricane, twisting and throwing and terrorizing anyone in their path. Let me separate for a second what I'm describing as bullying and bullies. Bullying is a terrible thing that I feel like a lot of kids do to each other. I'm not a saint, and I had my share of participating in some casual meanness, which, again, looking back, I understand why, and I'm ashamed of it, extremely ashamed of it. But I'm talking now about bullies, kids who've already gained that reputation of being trouble, the ones who anyone in the class could identify as the kid who's always pushing people around and looking for fights. They smile when inflicting pain, and it seems to give them great pleasure to hurt other kids. I had a kid in middle school who befriended me, or so I thought. We met there, and things seemed okay, I guess, until he had these mean flashes of anger where he would jokingly grab me by the shirt and shove me against the wall, or sometimes punch me in the arm or stomach. It was actually terrifying. But then he would get in my face and say something like, "I'm just kidding," as he'd stare me down and smile. It was confusing. He would dust me off and then go back to whatever normal is after those outbursts. He was physically mature for his age. All the signs of testosterone were there. One day, he decided he would bully me by whispering weird threats to me in class. We were sitting in the back, and I don't remember what it was he was saying, but he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew how to get under my skin, and again, took pleasure watching me squirm and writhe like I was an earthworm to him. He knew how to squeeze, and there was nothing I could or would do, since up until that miserable point, I never did anything back. That's also part of their one-sided tactic, and they know it. So I don't know how many arrows he had slung at me at this point, but my blood was boiling over at the top, and I lost it. I lost it. I jumped straight out of my seat, grabbed some craft scissors off a nearby table, and with my free hand, I grabbed his shirt and raised my other arm at him like I was going to end his life. I screamed with all of the pent-up negative energy I had built up. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He really did look like a frightened, pathetic little animal. The teacher and everyone in class turned to see what was going on. I mean, here I am, out of nowhere, out of character, standing over him like I'm the bully. Everyone saw my action, but no one saw it as my reaction. I crumbled like a wave hitting a sandcastle. I ran out of the room sobbing. I don't remember where I ran to or what happened after that, but here is actually what did happen as a consequence to my actions. I was suspended for 2 weeks from school, and only because my parents intervened. The school wanted to expel me. Me? I thought. I'm the victim. When I returned to school, nothing was the same. I was already struggling to fit into this new school. I didn't really know anyone. We moved out of the city I grew up in, so I didn't have any classmates that I grew up with. And you add puberty and my natural propensity toward depression, and there you have a picture of me sitting alone on a bench with only the company of my confusing thoughts. Now, thankfully, I had made a couple of friends at the beginning of the school year, and later on, we were able to commiserate over how messed up things were. But what really bothered me, more than I wanted to admit to anyone at the time, was how bad I felt for screwing up any opportunity of being the me I wanted to be. See, back before we moved and before puberty invaded my body and my thoughts like an occupying force, I was actually one of the more popular or likable kids at my little school. I had peers which were my equals. We shared ideas and were very creative and cooperative with our school projects, and the same for our free time. Our teachers had a curriculum which really encouraged and enhanced our understanding of the arts and sciences. It was a valuable education that wasn't lost on me even at the time. But when we moved, as tragic as that felt for me, I also wanted to give it a shot in this new town. Maybe I could reinvent myself, even just a little. But that never happened. Instead, I became the target for this leech who artfully sucked the life energy right out of me. And now I'm back from suspension, and it feels like all eyes are on me. Kids pointing and whispering. To put it bluntly, it sucked. It was the worst. I wasn't labeled a bully. I was labeled a weirdo. That weird kid from class with the scary outburst and the crying like a baby. Boom. It was over for me. My actions were never brave after that. I never tried to repair any reputation I thought I might have had in my lofty thoughts for wanting to be cool and liked by others. I just became the ousted, the quiet guy, the weirdo who hangs out with a couple of other kids who shared an unlikely bond of living through strange pain and no outlet for it. A misfit. And I was picked on and bullied for that too. I somehow made it through middle school, alive, but not well. So there's a break from school, and now it's summer. My mom signed me up for a week-long summer camp in the relatively nearby mountains. Things got interesting. What I hoped would be what any kid at the time hoped would be a fun activity-filled adventure quickly became a dark and very dangerous place to be. The 2 older camp counselors assigned to me and 5 other little humans bullied me to the brink of exhaustion. Every day. All the days I was there. I'll spare you all the gruesome, disgusting details and just reveal how it ended, or rather, how my mom found out. When the camp ended, she came to pick me up from the building in town. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't looking at her. She was happy to see me, of course, but I was ashamed. I didn't know what to say. I don't remember what was said. I just remember her crying and trying to comfort me. My next memory was of a police detective at my house taking down notes and asking me to take my shirt and jeans off for evidence of the crimes. I'm sad as I think about this. Embarrassed at the time, but sad. My attackers were clever in their tactics, and besides threatening me if I ever told anyone, they skillfully performed their heinous acts in a way that would not be obvious. Rather than hit me in the face, because then everyone would know, they chose any and all places on my body that would normally be covered by my clothing. I can still remember the audible gasp of my mother when I took my shirt off. Everything from my back and upper arms and chest and all the way down to my legs and torso looked like I had fallen into a vat of grape juice and it didn't wash off. It was bad. Really bad. There was plenty of psychological damage to go with that too, from my family of course. But for me, my own psyche was so broken from the trauma and callous and cowardly deeds that it took me a very long time of going to therapy to finally break out of the old habit of flinching when anyone would approach me for a hug. My response was to flinch and jerk my head suddenly. It was the scar of them raising their fists at me and threatening to hit me in the face. These bullies were professional grade. The trauma they inflicted was powerful. They got me good. I remember a few years later wanting to find them and get some kind of revenge. It never happened, and I'm glad I didn't pursue it, because like I said earlier, hurt people hurt people. That's the cycle. So, whatever happened to those guys? Who knows? My parents settled out of court with the camp administrators, and we never pursued any criminal complaints. I was too young to understand the civil and criminal justice systems and its complexities with my case, so I let it ride. It's just another chapter in my backstory now. Well, here comes the big show, high school. Turns out over the summer, I didn't grow out of my awkwardness. It just became worse. I was hit with both barrels by the first day of school. I now had glasses and braces. Nerd alert. This guy's going down. Might as well have worn a large target on the front and back of my shirt. Turned out, didn't need to. The bullying soon commenced. It didn't help that I had a strained relationship with my dad at that time and my mom to some extent as well. You know, looking back, home life wasn't awful, but it wasn't great. My dad had his own issues to deal with and chose to deal with it his way, which wasn't the best option. My mom also had her own internal struggles, which often didn't show themselves to me in the way my dad's did. And then of course the older teenager in the house, my sibling, who had their own storms to battle. To be fair, when I say it wasn't great, I just mean that there was a lot of emotional turmoil to be dealt with for all parties involved. But listen, everybody has pain and suffering and trauma. Everybody. It's how we deal with or choose to ignore it that dictates how the rest of our lives will play out. Well, mine was playing out pretty much as expected. Thankfully, again, I did have a very small group of friends that helped me get through the misery, but it wasn't enough. The bullying I experienced was of a higher caliber. It's the big leagues, remember? Everybody's trying to impress their fans. So the verbal abuse was coming from a lot of angles, but mostly from these older jocks. They were popular and wore their badges proudly. Letterman jackets and high school sport jerseys let everyone know they were the top dogs. Well, everyone who wasn't me. Their way of letting me know was by their constant berating and making fun of me, as well as their artful ways of pushing me to the ground as they casually did, and finally one day following me home and assaulting me by hurling chunks of asphalt at my head, before finally just beating me up on the spot for no reason. And I mean no reason. That was the day. I remember that day. That was the day I told my parents I'm done with going to that high school. I desperately needed a change of scenery and to be completely out of reach of those who saw fit to harm me. From my junior and senior years, I went to independent studies with some very kind teachers who showed me not only mercy and kindness, but interest in seeing me succeed. Thank you to those teachers and to all the teachers who are so passionate about their careers and in using everything in their arsenal to help kids get through the tough days. Thank you. There's an absolutely awesome and inspirational story about a teacher taking me under her wing for a week and the power of positivity, which I promise I will talk about in another video. But right now, it's the time to share with you what I know about the art of bullying and how you can navigate through the mess that it is. Hurt people hurt people. We've been saying this. I didn't know this as a young person. I didn't understand the root of the problem. I just thought that some people were mean or evil. Only through growing up and facing my own problems and going through therapy and seeing the world change, but it wasn't changing. I was changing. Did I realize the depth of the problem and how all we see is the symptom? Anger is a dangerous thing. It's necessary to allow ourselves to feel angry at times and actually quite healthy to express our anger as long as it doesn't take the form of aimlessly spewing on someone. And that's the problem with bullying and bullies. It's aimlessly spewing out all of the toxins and rage that's been building up for years. Even as a kid, you can absorb so much of your environment, and unfortunately, you absorb the bad with the good. Your little subconscious brain doesn't know the difference. And then depending on your own genetic makeup and individual personality, your own trauma will reveal itself in so many different ways. When anger takes the form of bullying, it's the mind and body's way of trying to boil off the excess. It's an explosion of misplaced rage and sadness that lands on the nearest victim. What a bully is doing, and you may already know this, is expressing their own self-hate and loathing onto a projection of what they see as themselves in another form. I'll word it differently. When that kid in middle school was bullying me, like literally in the act of assault, his subconscious mind was telling him that I was him. In a twisted, messed up way, he was now acting like he was the adult who bullied him at home and I was him as a little boy. Does that make sense? Psychologists call this behavior of bullying transference. One of the most tragic aspects of bullying is that the victim is seemingly random, and for the most part it is or can be. Like when someone belittles or berates a stranger in a fit of rage or aggression. The bully still sees themselves in the victim, but there's no relationship outside that public incident. But for a bully to face down the same victim over and over and over, there's this weird connection, like how he was with me in middle school. In other words, in his mind, he assumed he would see me day in and day out, so he schemed to befriend me. But his real intentions came out and I became his verbal and physical punching bag. Now pay attention to this part. It's the victim who chooses to stick around, not the bully. You have the choice to stick up for yourself, whether defending yourself with your words or your body. No one has the right to treat you that way. It's abuse. Hurt people hurt people. I was chosen by him because I never fought back. At the time anyway, I just didn't have it in me. My own personal baggage and trauma and thoughts didn't have the know-how or the impetus to get into physical fights. Not my style. Now imagine him finding some poor soul who never fights back and accepts his abuse as a normal part of the relationship. There's the cycle. That's how it perpetuates. So what do I do, you're asking? You have and have always had the two choices that we all have when in survival mode. It's called fight or flight. You can fight back physically. Sometimes, unfortunately, you have to. I am not advocating violence, but when it's defending yourself, sometimes it's the only answer. Or you can run away physically, get out of the way, get off the scene, get to safety. But there's a third option, and it's the one I chose for so long. You can freeze. Freezing is interesting because your body freezes, but your mind does not. Your brain is screaming for you to do something, but you physically are stuck. So in your mind, you play fight or flight. In your mind, you fight by fighting yourself, by telling yourself, this is okay. I can deal with this one time. It's not right, but maybe they're right. Maybe I am a weakling and a worthless piece of garbage. Maybe they're right. Or in your mind, you choose flight. Your brain is screaming at you to run away, but you know what? Maybe I am a weakling and a worthless piece of garbage. Maybe they're right. Do not let freezing be an option for you. If you find yourself freezing, I need you to find a way to know what to do before this happens. Have an honest discussion with yourself. I'll talk about how to gauge and assess where your self-esteem is at in another video. Look back on witnessing bullying behavior. Think of a time when you or someone you care about was bullied. Imagine what you would do now. If the person is verbally or physically assaulting you, do you fight back like your life depended on it? Does it even need to get to that point? Is there a way you can remove yourself from the situation and report it to someone who can do something about it? Look, I know it's tough when you're young and you feel like everyone is looking to see what you're going to do. You may feel peer pressure to say certain things or act tough. You may feel like if you don't fight back, you'll look weak. It's tough, I know. Everyone is trying to sort out their own confusing emotions and hormones, and at the same time, everyone else's energy is bouncing off each other, like that boiling water we just talked about. Don't let the water boil over the sides and splatter everyone around you. Talk to someone trusted about your feelings and emotions. Don't be afraid to feel your feelings. It's important that you feel them and not bottle them up and only later explode. Have at least one friend who gets you. If you have secrets that you want to share with someone else, talk to a trusted relative or school counselor or private therapist. Whatever you do, please share your thoughts and emotions with at least one other trusted person. Life is not meant to be so lonely. We need each other. And I need you to know something. Whatever's going on in your life right now, keep going. I believe in you.